Welcome. My name is Nancy Morrow Howell. I'm on the faculty at WashU, and I'm privileged to have the job of welcoming you today to this virtual conversation with 4 WashU alumni on growing old with gusto. My job is to introduce our accomplished moderator, Gail Zugerman, who instigated this gathering and will lead our discussion on growing older in a positive way. I've been given a few minutes to tell you about my work, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity because I love WashU. I'm a professor at the Brown School, where I coordinate coursework curriculum on older adults and aging society, and I advise grad students getting their MSW and their PhDs, and I'm the director of the Harvey A. Friedman Center for Aging at the university. The Center for Aging crosses both Danforth and medical school campuses, and we are charged with promoting research, education, and community engagement around all issues regarding older adults and aging society. All disciplines are involved, and we have a lot of activities. I'm going to name a few for you this morning. We are just getting ready for our summer program where we offer a curriculum every summer to undergrad students from not just WashU, but across the country, trying to interest them in careers in aging research. We sponsor monthly seminars on timely topics featuring researchers at WashU as well as community leaders. These have been virtual since the pandemic. We'll probably continue that because our audiences have grown, people joining from around the country. We'd love you to join us for those, and I'll be sharing some information about that. We have our annual Friedman Lecture, which is our signature event of the year. We give awards to students, faculty, staff, and community leaders, and we're always spotlighting a current topic. We just finished a fabulous Friedman Lecture on innovations in care for seriously ill people. We teach a course to freshmen at WashU, first semester freshmen, just getting to the university. It's called When I'm 64. And we talk about the personal and professional implications of their 100-year lives that many of them can look forward to. We have older adults who come to the class. I solicit participants from the community. I cannot teach that class without older adults. That has been so valuable. The older students engage in all the activities, discussions, exercises, and freshmen talk about this experience and how it breaks down stereotypes in their mind, and then vice versa. The older students are always so thrilled to meet these young people. It breaks down stereotypes in that direction as well, and they leave feeling more encouraged about the future, getting to know these very compassionate, dedicated, intelligent 18-year-olds. We have monthly newsletters and a website. We're going to direct you to those. We have recordings of all of our events that you could look at. We also solicit blogs. So if any of you would like to have an interest in writing something relevant to the Center for Aging, I encourage you to submit one to us. My scholarly work focuses on the productive engagement of older adults doing paid and non-paid work. So working, volunteering, caregiving. These are important roles, and we argue that we need to support older adults in these roles better than we do to improve outcomes for them, for their family, for society. We've focused on programs and policies to optimize productive engagement, but I have come to learn that attitudes about older adults and ageism have profound effects in this field. We can have great employment policies, but if employers or supervisors devalue, discriminate against older workers, negative outcomes still exist. So my work in productive engagement in later life has led me to focusing on more recently on ageism and age discrimination. So to achieve a productive aging society, fundamentally, we need to change attitudes about aging and dispel current assumptions about older adults and aging populations. This work fits so well with our topic today. I'm going to be so excited to hear from Gail and the panelists about how they have fashioned their lives in ways that resist the negative effects of ageism on so many people. Just wrap up with a few more things that are relevant to our work at the Center for Aging. We have just posted some information we'd like to share with you on ageism. We have an infographic to share, and we have a background paper that reviews all that we know about ageism and how it hurts all of us. We've been invited to do some presentations recently on ageism, so that'll be a new endeavor for us. We just spoke at the annual Diversity Day event at WashU, and we have other speaking events lined up coming up over the summer. So lastly, we have a new 8-week course offered through University College, so widely available. It's called Transitioning to the New Retirement Beyond Finances. We help people think about all aspects of retirement except for the financial end, which we need to leave to other experts, but we deal with purpose, social connection, health, leisure, focusing on midlife and beyond. If you're in the St. Louis area, because it will be in person in the fall, we invite you to attend. But we also have a 90-minute recorded seminar on our website that consolidates this information on transitioning to the new retirement. So as you can see, my work and the center's work is so relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm very pleased to introduce today's moderator, Gail Zugerman. Gail is a 1975 graduate of Washington University and currently hosts a podcast called Growing Older with Gusto. She is an experienced moderator, facilitator, and interviewer who spent the majority of her career as an independent qualitative marketing research consultant. Her expertise in working in the medical, business to business, and consumer markets with older population provided a background for creating a podcast that combines her expertise in interviewing and writing with her love for the wisdom of older people. So I'm so looking forward to this. Thank you, Gail, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And thank you at Washington University for having me and organizing what I know will be an energizing webinar. I've been an advocate for older people for many years as I've had longevity in my family and close relationships with several older family members. I gained much personal fulfillment and strength from their knowledge and wanted others in younger generations to become aware of this valuable resource, which I think is often overlooked in our country. I started blogging years ago about the subject of learning from older people. My blog grew into the podcast called Growing Older with Gusto. We are on Apple Podcasts, most other podcast platforms, and have a YouTube channel. Interestingly, it all came about through my tech tutor, a young male, age 37, who loved my concept and wanted to partner up with me. Our concept with the podcast was to provide a forum for older people to share their wisdom on how they got to where they are, living productive and positive lives. Our purpose is to inspire younger generations to embrace growing older and not fearing it. Today, we put together a panel of 4 graduates of Washington University who are great examples of how to grow older with gusto. I'd like to give a brief introduction of each panelist before we dive into some rather interesting topics. In no particular order, we have Alan Goldberg, who is a successful architect for 65 years, who has taken his professional skills and built on them to become a curator, magazine and book editor, graphic designer, lecturer, filmmaker, and fundraiser. Also, he has worked on the development of the infrastructure for the hydrogen car. Next is Andy Simon, who's a 1963 graduate of the Arts and Sciences at Washington University. He was an entrepreneur for many years, helping startups through their development phases. His belief that having fun in life comes from meeting challenges, and he's joined his wife's Blue Ocean Strategy, a consulting firm. He balances his work with travel, golf, skiing, and watching his grandchildren grow up. We had the good fortune to meet years ago on a Washington University trip to the Galapagos. Kiki Wilson is a woman of many talents who had a 25-year career in IT at Delta Airlines, has sung for many years with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra Chorus, and was an executive producer for a documentary about a choral director that won 3 Emmys. Collectively, we have over 100 years of experience and wisdom that we are bringing to you today. We have so much to talk about, so let's get going. Welcome. Welcome. I'd
Hi.
like to start out today by asking you all to give us just one fun or interesting fact about yourself.
Oh, I'll go first.
Anyone can just jump in.
Okay, well, in 1958, I took 7 weeks off from work to go to Europe. The next year, my wife wanted to go to Mexico, but I said, how can any country on our border possibly be of interest? Well, I went to Mexico initially under duress, but from then on for 60 years, I went to that country. In fact, Marta Turek, the leading anthropologist in Mexico, recently recognized me for my lifetime commitment to the Mexican artists and their work. So don't make snap decisions.
Very good advice. Anyone else?
Sure. I used to travel 100,000 miles a year on business. I obviously don't do that anymore with the pandemic, but we still do a lot of traveling. And I guess over the last 15 years, I've gone to about 37 different countries, including Ecuador, where I met Gail.
Kiki?
Well, as a singer and a musician, I have these little factoids, which is I've sung in Carnegie Hall more than a dozen times as
Wow.
part of a chorus, not a soloist, on 16 Grammy-winning albums. I hope we'll get into this a little more, but I went to Berlin for a year when I was 17 and was a hostess at the 1972 Munich Olympics, which were the terrorist Olympics, if anybody's old enough to remember that. And then, of course, plunging into making a film about another musician that won multiple awards, including 3 Emmy Awards, and went to national PBS broadcast and is now part of American Masters Library.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so for our first really meaty question, what do you attribute to living as long as you have?
Well, I think
Curiosity.
go ahead, Kiki.
Curiosity, passion, tenacity, and a deep love of my friends.
Well, I think that it really has to do with good genes. My father lived till 95 and he smoked and didn't exercise. My mother lived till 89, didn't smoke and exercise. So I think that exercising, I've got a long life ahead, and this ties, I guess, into what Nancy was talking about before, about living to 100.
You're on your way, Andy.
Well, I'm 91, and to be honest, I didn't take any extraordinary measures to be healthy. I didn't exercise a lot. I don't eat that well. So I have to say it's luck and good genes. But I have one non-scientific theory. For 4 years, I traveled to high school on the subway, 4 hours each way. And I think I was subjected to every possible germ on the planet. And therefore, I have an extremely developed immunity system.
That's really a good way of looking back on things.
It wasn't that much pleasure, but did have a benefit.
That's great.
When you look back in your lifetime, what are the technological changes that have been most significant in your life?
For me, it's communication. The year I spent in West Berlin, the cost of telephone calls was so high that in 1 year I had 1 telephone call with my family. Now imagine that in today's world, right? Of course, medical advances that are just beyond our comprehension, but for me, it was the telephone.
Andy?
Yeah, I think the way we communicate today is so different than how we communicated years ago. And I can remember conducting business using Zoom when we were in Vietnam, which is about 13 time zones away. So the ability to communicate quickly makes a very, very big difference today.
Well, I would have to say it's the computer. CAD drawings eliminate the need for a lot of tools. And you can copy them easily. You can change them and they always look brand new. And if you're working on a team with 12 people, it looks like they were drawn by one person. However, in spite of all these advantages, there are some disadvantages because when you're drawing, it's slow. And so you have time to think and time to make changes. And to quote Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect, he said, "It's not the tool, it's the man." So maybe technology is a little overblown.
Is it easier when you're working with a team of people if you're trying to come up with a construct for architecture? Is that easier for you?
No,
Be in
because
the present?
conceptually you have to draw. And because you have to be able to change quickly, go through many solutions. So CAD drawing is more mechanical, engineering type drawings. And as I said, they make life easy because I must have had 10 tools to do a drawing, and now I have a keyboard. But Frank Lloyd Wright is right. It's not the tool really, it's the man working the tool. And it's only as good as he is or she.
What do you wish younger people understood about life?
Well, I think that I've been a reasonably successful person, both in corporate America and as an entrepreneur. In both settings, I learned that there's no such thing as a straight line. And I wish younger people would understand that. You build things, you have successes and failures, and you build upon all your experiences. And I think also too often people give up. There are hurdles in life. You have to get over those hurdles. And once you get over those hurdles, take a deep breath, and there are hurdles again. So it's always clearing hurdles. And, when I spoke to people in my organization, I always talked about quoting Teddy Roosevelt and the Man in the Arena speech, where he said, "I always marvel a person who gravels in the dust and gets up to fight another day." So I think you've got to be bold and uh, bold and brave, and continue to move forward.
Very good.
I can't agree with that more, not more. Um, I, I think even with the blessing of decent health, people, none of us in the beginning probably realized how hard life is, but also, and more importantly, how precious it is. So taking time to build that rich tapestry for yourself and with others takes passion, commitment. You have to take the leap, maybe many, or sometimes anyway, outside of your comfort zone, but jumping in and staying the course. Just like my friend here said, it's anybody can jump in and jump out, but staying with it, biting the bullet, overcoming the many obstacles that will come in most situations. But the most important thing is to begin, even with a blank piece of paper, and not to listen to anyone. If you're committed, not to listen to anyone who says to you, you can't do it.
Great.
Well, I'd like to add to that education doesn't end when you graduate from college. It just begins. And life experiences is invaluable, even the bad ones. if you learn from them.
Absolutely.
And I think like all the major leaders from Churchill to Teddy Roosevelt, they all have a quote about a successful person is somebody who gets up after every failure. So to piggyback
Correct.
on what everybody else has said. Now let's turn it around. What do you wish you had known when you were younger about life?
Well, I wish I had known that someday life would end. Not that I would do anything differently, I probably wouldn't. But I was extremely fortunate in life, and I was so busy, I never really thought about my longevity. But I'm in a longevity study now at Albert Einstein Hospital. And I'd like to make one point because it's kind of funny. They have a new program, and I wanted to get in it. And they said, "You're too young." I said, "What do you mean? I'm in my 90s." They said, "No, you have to be 103."
Wow.
So people should start preparing for a long life and retire. Don't retire. Hold on as long as you can working.
For me, I would say if I had known the consequence of one event in your life, that one event in your life can change your life or have such a tremendous impact. So that event can be a success in our professional world, but it can be the death of a friend, the birth of a baby, a conversation with someone that just changes your life. For me, attending a live concert. So I have this probably silly sort of impression in my head that just as we're dying, we have the opportunity um, to have a reliving of the very important memories in our life. I know it sounds silly, but I think about that as I'm moving through this remarkable experience of living. And I wonder what will be on, in the flashes of my life. And it's amazing what little things I think will be there.
What are some of the little things that you think will be there, out of curiosity?
Um, uh, Meeting someone as uh, um, an impromptu event. So in St. Louis, when I came to screen the film at the St. Louis Film Festival, there was a woman walking through the airport with a very strange looking bag. And I sort of figured as a musician that there might be an instrument in that bag. And indeed there was. She was coming to St. Louis to do a couple of concerts. And we stood on the sidewalk there to get picked up and had this remarkable exchange of two artists who I followed her and she followed me for a very long time. And the influence of each of us on the other was, I won't say profound, but it was marked.
Wow, that's interesting. That's great. Andy?
Sure, I think that best laid plans don't necessarily work out. And I think you've got to be flexible enough to see opportunities and take advantage of them as you move along in life. And it can mean switching careers. It can mean going in another direction. So I think flexibility is very important. And I think tied with flexibility is the fact that you can't be discouraged by adversity. And what you've got to do is you've got to overcome that and be the best you can be.
Great. So my next question sort of piggybacks on this one. What is the best advice you've ever received?
I was considering leaving WashU at the end of my junior year for reasons I won't go into. A very good friend of mine, I went to New York City. I was going to get a job. I was fluent in a foreign language. Sat down with me and said, don't throw in the towel. Go back to the things that are very hardest in your life and complete them. And I think we've talked about this topic, in these very few minutes. It's about follow through. And for me, now I see the goal line and I go, it doesn't matter what's in between. And I go with the help of a team of people. I can't do everything myself. None of us can. And so surrounding yourself with really good people, whether it's in your personal life, where I had somebody who cared enough about me to sit me down at Rockefeller Center in front of that marvelous, I believe, it's John D. Rockefeller, right? But the other thing I would say is, and I'm continue to say, always follow your passion. If you have a passion, don't ignore it. If you can draw but your parents say, get a finance degree. It's not that is bad, but don't forget that you love to draw and find some way to incorporate that in your life.
That's great.
Well, my worst advice actually turned out to be my best advice. In my first year at Washington U School of Architecture, I was struggling. And my design instructor said, "You'll never become an architect. Design greeting cards." Well, I didn't take his advice, and I went on to practice architecture for 65 years, 55 years ahead of a very prestigious architectural firm. I was elected to the Fellow of the American Institute of Architects. I was given a distinguished Distinguished Alumni Award, Washington U. And yes, I do design my own greeting cards now.
So, Alan, I have a question. So what gave you the inner strength to say, I'm not going to listen to this professor?
Because I never believe what other people say. I don't look for comments, or I get it from inside. I'm my own critic. If I'm not doing something, I don't have to be told. I know it's not good. And so it was superfluous, whatever he thought. I think in architecture school, they thought that you had to have elephant skin hide to be able to withstand criticism in the real world. Well, I don't think that's true. You need to have confidence in your abilities. And if you fall down, you pick yourself up and keep going. In architecture, we were taught that tomorrow is always better than today. And I think that's a good attitude.
Andy?
Well, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Kiki and Alan said. I don't think you should walk away from something or someone if you can't make it work. I think you need to look for alternate solutions, and I think you can will yourself to make it work.
Well, I think that's a lot of great advice, and from people with a lot of experience. So thank you. Now I'd like you to think about what or whom has been most instrumental in shaping your life.
Well, I found a mentor that I could take cues from. He happened to be my partner, Elliot Noyes. He was a true Renaissance man. He majored in Latin, Greece, and industrial design in Harvard. He was an archaeologist, an architect, and an industrial design. And oh yes, he was the head of the glider corps in World War II. He was director of the Department of Industrial Design at MoMA. I could go on and on with his resume. But he taught me what it means to be an architect, and that architecture in life is moving forward. A lot of people dwell on the current and afraid of the future, but you have to look beyond that. And whatever is going on in your life, always look to the future. And also, I never saw him with egg on his face, which means he was always prepared for every eventuality. He knew going into a meeting what might happen. So you cannot be over prepared enough in whatever you're doing.
Interesting.
So find yourself a mentor.
For me, it was very different, although I've had a couple of incredible people in my life. And Alan, I totally, I'm so glad you brought this up. The preparation is so very important. I probably over prepare for whatever it is, a meeting, ask for money for a film, a rehearsal. But for me, as I look at my life, the most significant thing that happened to me was living in a divided city in 1969 when I was 17 years old. And I breezed in there in my little flowered jeans and my, cute American clothes, only to be sort of smacked with the reality that people who I grew to know and love lived with some pretty remarkable restrictions. You couldn't travel outside of Berlin without going through a significant geography of East Germany, where you might get stopped for nothing, have your car torn apart. It happened. I was with someone to whom this happened. All the cushions were, everything. And then they just say, you're done. Yeah. But I mean, there's just so many stories I could tell about that. But it absolutely framed my life to not take anything for granted. I mean, we're seeing now this horrific situation in the Ukraine where people like all of us that we know going about their daily lives, and suddenly it's totally interrupted. And you know that in Berlin, one Sunday morning, people woke up and there was a what's the name of that wire? Barbed wire wall, literally overnight, and families were separated, and people's professional lives and scholastic lives were totally interrupted. I mean, so anyway, it made me approach life. I came to WashU with, I think, a very different attitude about opportunity and, again, regarding life as a very, very precious thing.
Andy?
Sure. I've been married for 54 years. My wife is very accomplished. Even before I joined her company, we always shared everything. And that's made my life much easier because I get a non-biased opinion on all of my ideas, good and bad.
She's a lovely person. I know her. What is your definition of a life well lived? If you had to give our listeners a definition of a life well lived, what would you say?
Well, I think that's an individual question for each one of us. And I think it's divided into three parts for me: family, work, and community. And so looking back on my 8 decades, I think I've lived a life well lived.
Sounds like it to me. Anyone else?
Well, I think it's having spent your life well, doing the work that you love to do, and having a positive impact on other people.
Okay.
I think it's waking up each morning and looking forward to the day, knowing you have a contribution to make. It's not just, I know people who cross off the calendar every day with a big X, like that's behind me, that's over. And obviously when people say I'm bored, it just, sort of shakes my inside. But, and also that you have something new to learn. I think that that's a huge part of certainly why I look forward to every day. I had parents who were incredibly inquisitive and right almost to their dying day. And to know, well, and sharing all of that with friends. I have a remarkable circle of friends. And know that you haven't left too many regrets in your past, in your wake. That's where I am with that.
Great. All very valuable definitions. I have a couple of questions from our audience that I thought I would throw in right now. The first one is, I have trouble getting out of bed in the morning since I retired. Any suggestions?
I can only talk about what I do. The first thing in the morning, I get out of bed and I have a routine, and I work out and do exercises. So that forces me to get up at a certain time, because I know if I don't get up at that time, I'm not going to get through the day, and I'm not going to get through my regimented exercises.
And so the exercises really make you feel good, and it's a
Well,
good
it makes me feel good, but
jumpstart
it
the
all,
day.
but I guess what I'm saying is that it's important to have some type of routine which forces you to do something at a certain point in time.
Got it.
I think that person needs something interesting to do, because I personally, I don't want to go to bed at night. I want to get up in the morning. So I'm going to bed at 2 in the morning and getting up at 6. It's just a matter of getting involved in something you really, really love to do.
Okay.
I agree.
Anything to add? Anything else?
I, I, I know this also sounds sort of naive, maybe, but there is so much need in the world, in your community, and it can be anything that you participate in for a few hours a week, across the spectrum. I mean, just go out on the internet and take a look at something that you're interested in. I think if you make a phone call, and you don't need to get a salary, that's there's just so much. And being surrounded by other people who, I know I overuse this word in this conversation, but are passionate about what they do, that can be very infectious. And I absolutely agree with Andy about the routine and to start the day.
Yep. Mine is a great cup of coffee. But another
A
question,
great cup of coffee.
one more question from the audience.
We all have one.
Is there a spiritual dimension to your work life that drives you?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Is there a spiritual dimension to your work and life that drives you?
The naive one again, and this is just going to sound gooey, but living life by the golden rule, I have found, is just attracts such energy, real energy. And I believe in a greater spirit, and we can all call that what we will. And yeah, that greater spirit blessed me with an awful lot of diverse talents, and I think not sitting on them is a great motivator.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, my spirituality comes from helping others. There's a very famous Mexican folk artist who lost her sight by diabetes, and I've raised money for her. I've helped her. She's now 77 and she's still working. And I said to her, Josefina, you're blind. How can you do this? And she said, it's not the brain, it's not the eyes, it's the brain and the hand. So I think the capacity to help others is as much spirituality as you can get.
Andy?
Well, I want to turn this back to the question you asked before about a life well lived. So if you think about work, family, community, if you think you're involved in those three areas, then I think there's some spirituality and associated with that.
How so?
Well, I mean, if you really value your family, then that moves forward in terms of spirituality. I think the same thing in terms of community, and I think that the work part of it really ties everything together.
Very interesting. So what's next for everybody? What's on your plate?
Well, until recently, I never curated an exhibition, edited an international magazine, designed, did graphic design, self-published, and distributed an art book, run a fundraising job, organized competitions, become an authority on an art form. So it's time for me to take a hand in making a film. I've never done that.
Wow.
And the Rockefeller Foundation was kind enough to give me some seed money so I can start it. So it's always
Well,
good to
let's
do.
talk.
So
things
what's
that
your
you've never
topic going to
done
be?
before.
Alan, do you know what your topic is?
Yeah, it's based on the book. I did a book called Oaxaca Folk Art Response to COVID-19. I guess I can't make a plug for it, so I'll restrain myself. But COVID hit this town of Oaxaca very badly. And in order to protect themselves, they shut people out of their villages, sometimes with guns. But by doing so, they also cut out their livelihood. So I had a competition. You had to do an item no bigger than 10 inches with a COVID theme. And they did things that were whimsical, sad, and all kinds of materials. And I thought, wow, that's really good. I'll do a catalog. And then I thought, well, a catalog might as well do a book. And that may have been a mistake because self-publishing is hard. But anyway, you always should try something new in your life. Because you have
It sounds
skills
like
that,
a wonderful new challenge for you.
well, you have skills that you've developed in your work, and they usually can be applied to other things.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what's next for you, Kiki?
I have 3 ideas clicking around, but probably the most significant is I would like to pursue another film in the area of mental health. I suffer from what I think the academic experts, and it's a wonderful phrase, refer to as severe mental illness. And I've been able to overcome it with years and years and years of misdiagnosis, and but my main theme, or the topic I want to really focus on, is the stigma around mental illness, and how many people don't get help because their families are not supportive, or people don't understand what that's all about. I talked to Chancellor Wrighton about this several years ago, and he said, promise me that you'll do something about suicide in young people. So there are certainly topics that I hope we can explore. There's a team, the director for the Robert Shaw film is working on some mental health, a couple of mental health films, finished one that went to Sundance. So I'm very energized by a project like that.
Well, best of luck to you. That's wonderful that you're undertaking that.
Thank you. And maybe Alan and I can team up about making a film.
Yeah. What's your
Andy?
phone number?
You know the expression that if it's working, don't fix it. So I'm not going to try to fix it right now. I'm going to continue what I'm currently doing until I can't do it anymore. I have no retirement date, or as they say, no expiration date. That means I'm going to continue to serve clients in interesting ways, travel with my bride, and spend time with my grandkids. The only concessions I'm going to make is that I don't get on a horse anymore, and I can't ski the bumps on the mountain, but life's pretty good.
It sounds like very good decisions. Well, I'm out of questions unless anybody else wants to throw out a comment. I want to thank everybody. I think you've given a lot of good information to our audience. Anybody want to say anything else?
I'm just very impressed with my fellow panelists, I mean, they're doing some very, very exciting things.
Thanks, Andy.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you. You are an interesting group who definitely are growing older with gusto. I just wanted to add one more thing. I saw a little article on a Cornell study on aging that showed that older people were considered the most important advice givers. Their research showed that, quote, survival in pre-literate societies was dependent on the knowledge of the oldest members, quote. And I just thought that was a really nice way to end the panel discussion.
So I won't ruin it. That's not true of people, old people in this country. It's true of old people in other countries.
That was my purpose with the podcast. Exactly. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
This is awesome. Thanks.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I have been so impressed with this alumni event. We had at one point 135 people listening in. It certainly, Gail, thank you. It certainly was a forum for sharing wisdom. It makes me very excited about your work and your podcast. You developed great questions, and I could just see the deep appreciation you have for people that have lived long lives and what they have to share. So thank you. And the panelists, Andy, Kiki, Allen, were brilliant, more brilliant than I was expecting. I was expecting great, and this was just fabulous. I tried to keep track of all the pearls of wisdom, couldn't do that, gave up because I wanted to try to summarize. I will listen again. I hope that you all will listen again. We know that this recording will be made available to all of us. I guess I challenge us all to think about the one takeaway that will influence today and tomorrow for us, to identify that and to share it with others and to find a way to put into practice some of these wonderful ideas that we've heard. So thank you, Gail. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Alumni and Development, and have a terrific day. Thank you.